Alright, this is going to be the fastest and ugliest explanation of electric cars in probably all of YouTube. So let's get started. There are three types of cars we're going to talk about: longevity of electric cars, charging speeds and plugs, the range of cars, cost, and MPGe. So the first type of car, we got a plug-in electric. They call them PHEVs. It's going to be a Chevy Volt, a BMW i3, and they use electricity completely, and then when it dies out, then they use gas as a backup. Then you have electric vehicles, like a Tesla, a Chevy Bolt. They use only electric. There is no gas engine at all. And then you have the internal combustion engine, obviously a typical car, or a hybrid. They basically always are using gas. Hybrids are just going to confuse you. Just think about them as a regular vehicle. Electric cars have no muffler, oil leaks or changes, antifreeze to change, transmission fluids, no spark plugs, and they're better luxury vehicles in regard to the shifting, because there is none. The speed and power, because there's no shifting. You don't have to downshift and spend time on that to get some torque or whatever. You can just go. The maintenance on it is much, much less, just like a luxury vehicle. They are incredibly quiet, inherently quieter than any internal combustion engine. So it's obviously convenient with the maintenance and whatnot. In the environment, well, that's a nice bonus. But every other thing makes these things better than a typical vehicle. As for 0 to 60 metrics and everything like that, the reality is an electric car can pretty much smoke any regular gas engine coming off of a stoplight in normal driving conditions. So the longevity of an electric vehicle is that the battery dies and will not hold as much charge over time. So after 100,000 miles, you'll probably have about 5% loss in capacity over your range. So here's a crazy fast summary. There's 4 different types of plugs that charge at different speeds, called level 1, 2, or 3. The bigger the battery capacity, more range. When charging fast, the time to refill varies on how dead your battery is. Electric cars get about 3.5 miles per kilowatt hour, which makes it like paying 70 cents to go 30 miles. So level 1 is the slowest. It's 120 volts. It's like plugging into a regular outlet in your house. Level 2 is at 240 volts. You have to have a $300-400 system to basically wire up your house like you're plugging into a dryer outlet, something like that. Level 3 is also known as DC charging or fast charging. It's 480 volts. It's pretty much only at charging stations. You can't get it at your house. It is also the fastest way to recharge. So how long will it take to recharge is confusing because you have something called the state of charge. And the lower the SOC, state of charge, the faster the charge. So the SOC of 20% is like your cell phone saying you have 20% battery left. Every kilowatt you fill a battery makes the next kilowatt fill more slowly due to trying to keep the batteries from degrading and how these batteries work. 50% full batteries fill back up much more slowly than a dead battery. That's why you can't get a clear answer on how long it takes to refill these things. And most of the time, state of charge issues come up at the fastest levels of charging, like level 3. So here's our 3 plugs. Level 1, level 2, you got these things, they call them 3 different things. J1772 or whatever, SAE 1772. That's not important. You got level 1 charging. Pretty much everything uses it. Teslas use it with an adapter. Chevys, Nissans, Hondas. Then you got level 3 charging, which is basically just like the level 1 port, except it's got a little extra something there at the bottom. And Chevys use those. Volvos use those. They call them CCS a lot of times. Then you have a level 3 for the Nissans, Hondas, and Teslas with an adapter. They call them CHAdeMO. It's a terrible name. It looks confusing. It's got upper and lower case. That's the way it is. So basically certain car brands are using different types of plugs essentially. And then Tesla, they've got their own plug. Plugs into level 1, 2, or 3 charging. And so for their level 3, they call it a supercharger. Their level 2, they call it HPWC. Names don't really matter. As long as you know that you're at a Tesla station, it's going to charge as fast as it can. So there's 3 levels of charging. Again, 1, 2, and 3. 4 different plugs total. Plus, wireless charging pads are coming, which is going to be awesome. So here is a stat on a lot of the ranges for the vehicles out there, for the electric vehicles. And you can kind of see like the Teslas, the best at 310 miles of range. And then you got some other, like the BMW i3. It's got about 81 miles of range. So they all vary. You can see it here. Pause it if you'd like, but we're moving on. So for every kilowatt hour, you can travel about 3.5 miles in the average electric car. So these numbers here are taken off of Wikipedia in the terms of their stats. So like the Chevy Volt, the first edition, 2013 to 15, it's got a 17 kilowatt hour battery, and it can go about 38 miles. Therefore, if you divide it into it, the miles per kilowatt hour is about 2.3. If you start averaging up all of these and look at the newer cars, it's about 3.5 times, or not 3.5 miles per kilowatt. So the ranges vary based on a couple things. One is temperature. Colder weather makes it worse. 72 degrees is best. And city miles get better than the highway because the brakes regenerate the battery. So it's kind of like opposite for an electric car for city and highway miles in terms of like how efficient it is. So Chevy Bolt examples, there was one guy that did some great work on this. He showed that he got 4.2 miles per kilowatt when he traveled 40 miles an hour, 72 degrees. And you can see some of these other examples here. And it basically goes from 4.2 down to 3.5. And that's probably common in most situations. It's easiest just to think about getting 3.5 miles on average per kilowatt, or just think about it being 3. You know, just round it a little bit more. And so a 100 kilowatt battery would tell you, hey, I'm probably going to get 350 miles of range. So a test drive tip is to check the range after the vehicle is fully charged, but remember the guessometer, the thing that tells you how many miles you got left, is going to be a factor of how aggressive the car has recently been driven. So if you look at how full it is, and it says 41 miles, you may get better than that because it's been driven so aggressively when people test drive it or whatever. So keep that in mind whenever you're test driving these things. Don't just think that the batteries are all degraded or something like that. So we got a few analogies here. Different pumps, like diesel and gas, is the equivalent of different plugs. Battery capacity is just like a gas tank. Usable battery capacity is like a gas tank that has gas in it that can never be accessed. So a electric battery, you can only use so much of it. You can't use every little drop of kilowatt hours or whatever. You can only use so much. So you have this capacity issue. Then you have charger and converter efficiency. This is kind of like spilling gas that you paid for all over the ground. When that electricity comes into your vehicle, it has to convert to DC and be able to charge up that battery. And when it converts, it basically loses some energy, basically. And MPGe, this is basically miles per gallon. How far can I go on the same amount of energy? MPGe is a confusing thing. We're going to knock it out real easy at the very end of this. So you can simplify a lot of this stuff by just rounding. So if you just think level 1 gives you 1 kilowatt hours, level 2 is 6 kilowatt hours, level 3 is 40 kilowatt hours, then you can figure out how long it's going to take you to charge up. Let's say you need to go, 7 miles. Well, if you get 3.5 miles per 1 kilowatt hour, well, it's going to take 2 hours at level 1 charging, right? So essentially, you got a few things here that are in this chart. And so one is the cost. So everybody has a regular outlet in their house, so there's no cost. You can change the amperage that comes in through that charge for your car. You can pick 12 amps or 8 amps if you have other things on the circuit. You don't want to blow a circuit breaker or something like that. You're going to get less kilowatts per hour. So whenever I say 1, it could be 0.9, it could be 1.4, but basically it's just 1, right? Level 2, you have different costs. So one, you have to have the electrician install that dryer vent sort of outlet for you. And then secondly, you go to Amazon and you type in level 2 car charger, and there's different models out there. And those different models have different amperage. And the different amperages have different kilowatt hours that they can charge. So it might be 4, kilowatts per hour. It might be 10. If you're at a public charging station, like with Blink IQ, it could be 19 kilowatts per hour. So that's why people don't really can can tell you, is it 6 times better than level 1, or is it 4 times? Well, it depends on the amperage, depends on what system that you've got or model that you've installed or whatever. So you can go through here and look at all these. Level 3, it varies a lot. 60 amps to 150 amps. Most common is 50 amps, and you're going to get 50 kilowatt hours. Again, level 3 is going to give you 40, maybe 50. It just sort of depends. But there's a lot more amperage. You can't install that at your house. Has to be at a charging station. And the other factor that starts to kick in is this state of charge issue. And this is where a lot of confusion comes in. The more your battery is depleted, let's say it's 100% depleted, i.e. it's 0% charge, then you're going to get 64 kilowatt hours. So if it's fully charged, let's say fully charged is in like 70%, you might only get 10 kilowatts per hour, so which is essentially level 2 speed. So the level 3 starts off really fast, 64 kilowatts per hour, and then starts to slow down. Once it gets to 70%, all level 3 chargers basically slow down to the point to where it's level 2, so it's around 10 kilowatts an hour. So if you are, let's say, driving, it's a full battery, you drive 10 miles, and then you go to a level 3 charger to charge up in a couple minutes, not going to work like that. It's going to work just like a level 2, and you're back in these sorts of parameters or whatever. So hopefully that makes sense. Electric is cheaper, and we're going to talk about the costs now. Electric is cheaper as long as gas is over 70 cents a gallon, and cars get about 25 miles per gallon. It costs about $1 for 10 kilowatt hours from your electric company. That's the average across America, and obviously it could be more or less. Electric stations, the public charging stations and whatnot, they charge about 6 times more than your power company would, or double what you would pay at a gas station. So for example, if you're always filling up on the road, you're filling up your electricity on the road, it's going to be double what you would be paying if you just had a gas engine. So keep that in mind. Most people are going to charge up at their home. So if you have power company rates, and you can look yours up, it might be 10 cents per kilowatt hour. So 10 kilowatts is 35 miles. Remember, because it's 3.5 miles per kilowatt, it's about $1, right? Because 10 cents, 10 kilowatts, $1. You can look through all that and check out all the math on this. But electric charging stations, they charge 0.6 kilowatt hours. So 2 gallons of gas is equal to 25 miles per gallon. Okay, well, $2 for 20 kilowatts is 70 miles. So how many gallons of gas does it take to go 70 miles? Well, it's 2.8 gallons. 70 miles divided by 25 miles per gallon. That's the average car. If 2.8 gallons costs $2, how much would a gallon of gas cost? The answer is 70 cents, because $2 divided by 2.8. This may be fast, but if you sit here and look at this for a little bit, it may make sense. You may not even care. All right, so here's the geeky stuff. The charger and converter loss explained with some sloppy stats. The Chevy Volt loses about 25% of the kilowatt hours that come into the battery due to conversion loss going from AC to DC. Imagine paying for 10 gallons of gas, but only getting 7.5 gallons in your tank. That's basically what happens when you fill up a Chevy Volt, and most other electric vehicles too. Also important to remember, you don't get what the output is of the electric station. Meaning if you're at Whole Foods and there's 7 kilowatt hour level 2 charger, you think that you're going to get 24 miles of range, 3.5 miles times 7 kilowatts over the course of an hour. But you may only get 75% of that due to the charger loss, so keep that in mind. Accessible battery capacity. For example, Chevy Volt can only access about 60 to 70% of its battery. They allowed more usage in the Chevy Bolt, and a couple of them caught on fire. And they reduced that capacity to fix that. Overfilled batteries degrade as well. So the last part here is dealing with miles per gallon equivalent. It's confusing because a gallon of electricity is nonsense. 33.7 kilowatt hours is the equivalent of 1 gallon of gas in terms of energy. Some engineer figured that out. That's what it is. That's what we're going to believe. 33.7. So the question of MPGe is, how far can I drive with 33.7 kilowatt hours? Well, miles per kilowatt is a better way to think about range, in my opinion, which is just about 3.5 miles. So I got a kilowatt hour. How far can I go? 3.5 miles. That, I think, is what is going to be much more simplistic for people. But for this MPGe, it's confusing. So if we go back and do the math on this, if you have 33.7 kilowatt hours and 3.5 mile range, then the MPGe is 33.7 times 3.5, 118 MPGe. So anyway, that's as fast as I can, talking about all the different aspects of electric vehicles. Hopefully this has helped some of you guys out, or at least giving you some terms to where you can go and Google some of the other things. Feel free to comment below. Tell me how fast I'm going and it's too fast, and tell me something. Talk to you soon. Bye.